So by a show of hands, how many of us were more agile 40 years ago than we are now? Okay, that appears kind of universal. So Billy Joel was unable to join us today. So he sends his apologies. But I do want to invite everyone to do something that we probably haven't done for a while, if ever here. I want to invite anyone who feels up to it here in Drexel Hill and those of you throughout the world on Zoom to participate in a role play. I can hear you saying, oh no. Right. So no judgment if you choose not to join in, but if you want and you're open to it, give it a shot. Remember, we can see everyone. So I would ask anyone that wants to begin by standing up. And now I would ask you to lean over 45 degrees. And as we do that, do we feel the strain on our backs and our necks and our shoulders? Yeah, yeah. So I want you to imagine living with this perspective. Notice how restricted your vision is. I notice most of the people here aren't looking at me anymore. Just saying, because it's pretty hard to look anyone in the eye, of course, except those other people who are bent over next to you who might catch your eye, right? Our nameless bent over woman was probably looked down upon or invisible to others. And now I ask you to feel free to sit down because, you know, the crazy person in me suggests maybe we could just do that for the whole homily. But you know, I told you I have an editor. And so last night, our daughter, who's back in town because she's going to see Harry Styles on Tuesday night. So she's working from Philadelphia since he's playing at the Garden in New York. And so we're at dinner and she says, Mom, this is really weird. It's kind of like, I'm like, you don't like it? She's like, no, I like it. It's just really weird. And don't make people keep doing that. I'm like, okay. So let the 25-year-old add some sense to her mother. So the gospel we heard today of the bent over woman is a gospel that is never proclaimed in Roman Catholic churches on Sundays. You would hear it on Monday of the 30th week in ordinary time, which I believe this year is October 24th. I like it though, so that's why I chose it today. Let's zero in on what happens. Jesus is teaching in a synagogue. There's a woman who has suffered for a long time, 18 years. And she is incapable of standing up straight. What does Jesus do? Calls her over, lays hands on her, and says, you are free of your infirmity. And immediately she stands up straight and begins thanking God. Was it scoliosis, arthritis, bones fused together? We don't know what caused her to be bent over. What we do know is that trauma lives in our bodies. Jesus's interaction with her made all the difference in her life. She stood up straight and began a whole new way of being and living. So let me ask you, do you ever feel bent out of shape? Physically or emotionally? Perhaps the anonymous gospel storyteller we call Luke failed to give this woman a name because he wants us to see this woman as ourselves, even if we're men. Imagine what our world would be like if more people embodied the courage and compassion and mercy of Jesus. When I think about the combination of courage and compassion and mercy, I think of a man named August. And since this is the last Sunday of August that I am preaching, I want to introduce you to this awe-inspiring man, especially those of you who came to the community of St. Mary Magdalene after 2012. He passed away 10 years ago this November. In addition to being a brother, a loving husband to Cass, a foster father to countless children with special needs, a veteran, a lawyer, and a founding member of this community, he was a Vincentian priest who fully embodied Vatican II. I'd go so far as to say he catalyzed renewal at a Philadelphia parish. We called him Bud, and it was his words in our second reading this morning. Humble, soft-spoken, kind, approachable. If there was a wanted poster for a servant leader, his face would be on it. Bud's focus was on getting people to feel connected. His unassuming manner brought out the best in everyone. Certainly, that was true here at St. Mary Magdalene. Hospitality was a reflex for Bud. Dick Taylor, who actually wrote the book that I took the second reading from, God's Love is Fire, A Parish Becomes a People. It's the history of St. Vincent de Paul Parish in the Germantown section of Philadelphia. Dick teased Bud that every time he preached, he had 3 points. Part 1, God loves you with an incredible, overwhelming love. Part 2, God calls you to love everyone with that same love. And part 3, what are the implications of this? I don't know. It's up to you to figure it out. Pretty effective model for homilies. Bud was pastor of St. Vincent's in Germantown between 1977 and 1983, sowing and watering seeds and empowering people to start innovative programs that to this day benefit the Germantown community. A couple of years ago, I had lunch with Cass in Chestnut Hill one day. And since we were only about 15 minutes away, we drove down Germantown Avenue back to St. Vincent's, where Cass caught up with Brother Al Smith, who first started working at St. Vincent's Parish in 1957. And he's still there. Kind of amazing and a wonderful guy. As we heard in our second reading today, that Fran Kai proclaimed so well, have courage in the dreams and hopes and visions that can stir our hearts and move us. Say no to exploitation and greed, injustice, and yes, to a new humanness in ourselves and our communities with a clear concern for our poor and oppressed. I love that. A new humanness in ourselves and our communities with a clear concern for the poor and oppressed. God shared that message with compassion and mercy more than 40 years ago. And he lived it every single day of his life. Now I want you to take a moment and think about where you were in 1977, say between 77 and 83. Was this the message you were hearing from your pastor? For me, the answer is no. Bud's fingerprints are everywhere. I see them all over this community, even when Bud physically is no longer among us. My friends, let's each of us take Jesus's message and Bud's august message, in this context, meaning honorable and impressive, and strive to practice courage and compassion and mercy and kindness every day of our lives. God bless you all.